a WikiVidi documentaries production. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Enjoy. Hurricane Florence. Hurricane Florence was a powerful and long-lived Cape Verde hurricane that caused catastrophic damage in the Carolinas in September 2018, primarily as a result of freshwater flooding. Florence dropped a maximum total of 35.93 in of rain in Elizabethtown, North Carolina, becoming the wettest tropical cyclone recorded in the Carolinas, and also the eighth-wettest overall in the contiguous United States. The sixth named storm, third hurricane, and the first major hurricane of the 2018 Atlantic hurricane season, Florence originated from a strong tropical wave that emerged off the west coast of Africa on August 30, 2018. Steady organization resulted in the formation of a tropical depression on the next day near Cape Verde. Progressing along a steady west-northwest trajectory, the system acquired tropical storm strength on September 1 and fluctuated in strength for several days over open ocean. An unexpected bout of rapid intensification ensued on September 4-5, culminating with Florence becoming a Category 4 major hurricane on the Saffir-Simpson scale, with estimated maximum sustained winds of 130 miles per hour. Strong wind shear tore the storm apart, and Florence degraded to a tropical storm by September 7. Shifting steering currents led to a westward turn into a more suitable environment. The system regained hurricane strength on September 9 and major hurricane status by the following day. At 1600 hours UTC on September 10, Florence again became a Category 4 hurricane, later reaching a new peak intensity with 1-minute winds of 140 miles per hour and a central pressure of 939 mbar. Afterwards, Florence weakened slightly as it underwent an annual replacement cycle, but began to strengthen again late on September 11. However, increasing wind shear caused the storm's winds to gradually taper over the next few days, though the storm's wind field continued to grow. By the evening of September 13, Florence had been downgraded to a Category 1 hurricane, though the storm began to stall as it neared the Carolina coastline. Early on September 14, Florence made landfall just south of Wrightsville Beach, North Carolina, and weakened further as it slowly moved inland. Florence degenerated to a post-tropical cyclone over West Virginia on September 17, and 2 days later, the remnants of Florence were absorbed into another frontal storm. Early in the storm's history, the system brought squall conditions to the Cape Verde Islands, resulting in some landslides and flooding, but overall effects were negligible, with the threat of a major impact in the southeastern and mid-Atlantic United States becoming evident by September 7. The governors of North Carolina, South Carolina, Virginia, Georgia, and Maryland, and the mayor of Washington, D.C., declared a state of emergency. On September 10 and 11, the states of North Carolina, South Carolina, and Virginia all issued mandatory evacuation orders for some of their coastal communities, predicting that emergency personnel would be unable to reach people there once the storm arrived. Despite making landfall as a weakened Category 1 hurricane, Florence still had enough wind speed to uproot trees and cause widespread power outages throughout the Carolinas. A ridge of high pressure over eastern North America stalled Florence's forward motion for several days while making landfall, moving forward at only 2. The storm continually dumped heavy rain along coastal areas from September 13, when the outer rain bands first began to be felt, to September 15, when the storm was still stalled out only a few miles west of Wilmington. Coupled with a large storm surge, this caused widespread flooding along a long stretch of the North Carolina coast, from New Bern to Wilmington, as the storm moved inland, from September 15 to 17. Heavy rain caused widespread inland flooding, inundating cities such as Fayetteville, Smithfield, Lumberton, Durham, and Chapel Hill, as major rivers such as the Neuse River, Eno River, Cape Verde River, and Lumber River all spilled over their banks. Most major roads and highways in the area experienced some flooding, with large stretches of I-40, I-95, and US Route 70 remaining impassable for days after the storm had passed. The city of Wilmington was cut off entirely from the rest of the mainland by floodwaters. The storm also spawned tornadoes in several places along its path. Many places received record-breaking rainfall, with more than 30 measured in some locations. At least 53 deaths were attributed to the storm, and damage is currently estimated at more than $38 billion. Meteorological history. On August 28, 2018, the National Hurricane Center began monitoring a tropical wave and elongated trough of low air pressure over Western Africa for possible tropical cyclogenesis within the subsequent 5 days. As it progressed westward, development into a tropical cyclone became increasingly likely on the following day, and a more defined low coalesced along the coast of Senegal on August 30. Favorable environmental conditions, including ample moisture and low wind shear, enabled further organization and development of broad shower and thunderstorm activity. Lacking a well-defined center, but posing an immediate threat to Cape Verde, the NHC began issuing advisories on the system as potential tropical cyclone 6 later that day. Easterly trade winds propelled the disturbance along a west-to-west-northwest trajectory through much of the day, and into August 31, convection remained confined to the southwest of the disturbance within a monsoon trough and precluded its classification as a tropical cyclone. Toward the end of August 31, the system's convective organization became sufficient for the NHC to mark the formation of Tropical Depression 6, as the system passed south of Santiago in Cape Verde. Surface pressures on the island fell to 1005 mbar at 1800 hours UTC. By September 1, the primary steering factor shifted to a strong subtropical ridge anchored well to the north. Moderate wind shear temporarily stunted development and displaced convection to the eastern side of the depression. Pronounced banding features surrounded the circulation and the depression intensified to a tropical storm. The NHC accordingly assigned the system the name Florence. Steady development marked the system's intensification. Satellite intensity estimates indicated Florence achieved maximum sustained winds of 60 miles per hour by 9 o'clock UTC on September 2. Thereafter, shear and entrainment of dry air displaced convection from the surface low, leaving it exposed. Considerable uncertainty in the forecast for Florence arose, as weather models began to depict various different solutions. Fluctuations in organization and intensity continued through September 3. Development of a small central dense overcast and a mid-level eye feature signified that Florence achieved hurricane strength early on September 4, roughly 1,240 miles west-northwest of the Cape Verde Islands. Unexpectedly, the system rapidly organized within a small area of low wind shear in an otherwise adverse upper-level environment. Florence's small size enabled it to take advantage of this localized area. The hurricane's core structure, eye, and outer banding improved markedly, catching forecasters off guard and intensifying beyond model outputs. In stark contrast to model guidance, Florence continued to intensify and attained major hurricane status at 12:35 UTC on September 5. Sustained winds rose to 130 miles per hour and its pressure fell to 953 mbar. This ranked it as a Category 4 hurricane on the Saffir-Simpson scale. Situated at Florence became the northernmost Category 4 hurricane east of 50 degrees west ever to be recorded. The hurricane's unforeseen intensification caused it to track farther north, out of the localized low shear. Persistent shear finally took its toll on Florence on September 6 through September 7, causing convection to become asymmetrical and tilting the storm's course southwest to northeast. Rapid degradation of Florence's structure occurred by the early hours of September 7. The storm's low-level circulation became exposed as its convection became displaced to the northeast, and the previously well-defined eye dissipated. Scatterometer data revealed the system weakened to tropical storm intensity by 3 o'clock UTC. Meteorologist Rob Bierberg described the intensity forecasts for Florence as a self-defeating prophecy, owing to the nuances of the environmental shear. A building mid-level ridge halted Florence's northward movement, leading to a westward turn. Weather models became increasingly consistent on the storm's future track, leading to greater confidence in a major impact to the southeastern United States. This trajectory proved climatologically unusual, with United States hurricane landfalls primarily originating farther south and west than Florence. Environmental conditions became increasingly conducive to reorganization on September 8 as NOAA hurricane hunters began reconnaissance of the cyclone. Convective banding blossomed around the storm, and a formative eye appeared on satellite imagery. The storm's central dense overcast became more defined, and a complete eye wall developed within its core. Florence reattained hurricane status by 1500 hours UTC on September 9, with the hurricane hunters observing 76 miles per hour sustained winds at the surface. Fueled by sea surface temperatures of 29°, Florence rapidly intensified overnight. Convective bursts with frequent lightning surrounded the eye wall, giving rise to a well-defined 12 miles wide eye. Expanding outflow ventilated the cyclone, enabling continued growth. The system rapidly re-achieved Category 4 intensity by 1600 hours UTC on September 10, with reconnaissance aircraft recording surface winds near 130 miles per hour and a central pressure of 946 mbar. Hurricane Florence achieved its peak intensity late on September 10, with 1-minute sustained winds of 140 miles per hour and a minimum central pressure of 939 mbar. The extent of hurricane force winds doubled in size, and well-defined mesovortices rotated along the inner eye wall. Slight weakening ensued thereafter as an eye wall replacement cycle started. Convection surrounding the eye wall became ragged and the eye itself filled. This process completed on the following day, with the newly formed eye spanning 35 miles across. Extensive outflow became established over the cyclone, extending northwest and east, providing ample ventilation and deformation which enabled Florence to continue expanding. The future track of the hurricane became increasingly complex as it approached the Carolinas. A strengthening trough moving inland over the Pacific Northwest amplified ridging over the northeastern United States and western Atlantic Ocean, steering Florence to the west-northwest. A collapse of steering currents was anticipated around the time of landfall on September 14, which would result in the hurricane meandering near the coast or just inland for a prolonged period of time. Fluctuations in the organization of Florence continued through the remainder of September 11 into September 12. Increasing wind shear caused the inner structure to degrade, and the system degraded to Category 3 status by 1800 hours UTC. Continued weakening occurred and Florence later fell below major hurricane intensity later that night. The weakening pace slowed as the satellite presentation improved somewhat on September 13, with an eye attempting to emerge again. The hurricane's motion slowed significantly, and it began to turn northwest towards the Carolina border. At 11:15 UTC on September 14, Florence made landfall just south of Wrightsville Beach, North Carolina as a Category 1 hurricane, with sustained winds of 90 miles per hour and a central pressure of 958 mbar. Although the hurricane began a weakening trend after making landfall, the forward speed decreased, causing Florence to move very slowly west to southwestward as it produced torrential rainfall over the Carolinas. Late on September 14, Florence weakened to a tropical storm over extreme southeastern North Carolina. Florence continued weakening while dropping heavy rain, and weakened into a tropical depression by 9 o'clock UTC on September 16, while located over South Carolina. By this point, Florence had also begun to gradually accelerate westward. At that time, the NHC issued its final advisory on Florence, transferring responsibility to the Weather Prediction Center. On September 17, Florence slowly turned to the northeast, while continuing to weaken. Late on the same day, Florence weakened into a remnant low, while situated over West Virginia. On September 18, the remnants of Florence emerged off the New England coast, before being absorbed into a frontal system over the North Atlantic. On September 19, Cape Verde and Bermuda. Upon the designation of potential tropical cyclone 6 on August 30, the government of Cape Verde issued tropical storm warnings for the islands of Brava, Fogo, and Santiago. Domestic airlines cancelled 20 flights on August 31 and September 1. Maritime travel was also suspended for this period. Mariners were advised to remain cautious of large swells around the islands, potentially reaching 3 to. Under the threat of damaging waves, the Autoridade Nacional de Proteção Civil evacuated 125 people, primarily elderly, from Furna and Rincão. 11 military personnel were deployed to Rincão to assist in evacuations and preparations. Tropical storm warnings were discontinued on September 1 as the system progressed westward and no longer posed a threat to the archipelago. In anticipation of adverse conditions, Norwegian Cruise Lines and Oceania Cruises adjusted itineraries for Norwegian Escape, Norwegian Dawn, and Sirena to avoid crossing the hurricane's path and not dock in Bermuda. United States. As forecast models indicated an increasing threat to the southeastern United States, North Carolina Governor Roy Cooper declared a state of emergency on September 7. Transportation rules for farmers were waived to enable faster harvesting. President Donald Trump declared an emergency in North Carolina, granting the state access to federal funds. An overnight curfew was established for Lumberton for the duration of the hurricane. South Carolina Governor Henry McMaster followed suit on the next day. The South Carolina Emergency Management Division and Harvest Hope Food Bank began mobilizing resources for potential recovery efforts. The SEMD raised operation conditions to Level 3 on September 9 and began preparations for the possibility of a large-scale disaster, with forecasts showing Florence striking the state as a major hurricane. Local officials established overnight curfews for the cities of Ana, Conway, Dillon, Myrtle Beach, and Surfside Beach to limit the number of people on the roads and enable effective emergency responses. The entirety of Orion and Marion counties also fell under curfews. On September 8, Virginia Governor Ralph Northam also declared a state of emergency. On September 10, Maryland Governor Larry Hogan declared a state of emergency for the entire state, with the potential of historic, catastrophic, and life-threatening flooding in Maryland. On September 11, Washington, D.C., Mayor Muriel Bowser declared a state of emergency for the entire District of Columbia due to the imminent threats on the people of D.C., including threats to health, safety and welfare, caused by Florence. On September 12, Georgia Governor Nathan Deal issued a state of emergency for the entire state. Evacuation and closures. Mandatory evacuation orders for residents and tourists on Hatteras Island in Dare County began on September 10, with orders expanding to the rest of the county the following day. Evacuations along the rest of the Outer Banks and in Brunswick County went in effect on September 11. On September 10, Governor Henry McMaster ordered evacuations for the entire coastline of South Carolina, constituting roughly 1 million people. On September 10, Virginia Governor Ralph Northam ordered mandatory evacuations for low-lying coastal areas in the Hampton Roads and Eastern Shore regions effective September 11, constituting 245,000 people. The U.S. Navy has moved 30 ships stationed off the coast of Virginia farther out to sea, to protect the ships in the coastline. In North Carolina, mandatory evacuations were issued on September 11 for Brunswick County, Carteret County, Craven County, Onslow County, Pamlico County, Tyrrell County, North Topsail Beach, Emerald Isle, Ocracoke Island, Atlantic Beach, Indian Beach, Cure Beach, Pine Knoll Shores, and Wrightsville Beach. A mandatory evacuation for visitors and tourists was issued on September 11 for Holden Beach, Oak Island, and Currituck. Voluntary evacuations were issued for Bertie County, Beaufort County, and Surf City. A voluntary evacuation was also issued for New Hanover County on September 10, including Wilmington, North Carolina. The University of North Carolina at Wilmington issued a mandatory evacuation effective on September 10. All students were evacuated by noon on September 11. The university collaborated with the University of North Carolina at Asheville to house students who had no options for safe shelter. College football games scheduled at North Carolina State University. East Carolina University, Wake Forest University, Appalachian State University, the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, and the University of South Carolina were cancelled as a result of the storm. Several universities in North Carolina have announced closings in preparation for the hurricane. In South Carolina, in 26 eastern counties, public schools were closed until further notice beginning on September 10. State offices in these counties were also ordered closed, while county-level officials could decide when to close their offices. Atlanta Motor Speedway, Bristol Motor Speedway, Charlotte Motor Speedway, and Talladega Superspeedway opened their campgrounds to evacuees of Hurricane Florence free of charge. In West Virginia, Governor Jim Justice ordered for construction along northbound Interstate 77 between the Virginia border in Mercer County and Charleston to be suspended in order to improve traffic flow for evacuees. In addition, West Virginia state parks offered reduced rates for rooms, cabins, and campsites until September 18 in order to provide assistance to evacuees. Brought to you by WikiVidi Documentaries. Would you like to know more?